Ah, that was so peaceful. So great. Welcome,
Great way to
everybody,
start.
to the first episode of Michael Maher Live featuring. I don't know if that's really going to be the show title forever. We'll see what happens. But we are going live, and we are going live to talk about all things brand. And today I have a guest with me who has been on my podcast, The Longer Game, before. And we're going to talk about brand innovation today because I think that's something that's probably in people's minds, and actually making it happen could feel more challenging than maybe it needs to be, but I can always be proved wrong. And today on the show is Carter Jensen. Welcome to the show, man. I know you work at General Mills. You're in charge of enterprise capability, senior director. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me, and it's great just to be able to chat and something as interesting as brand innovation, and who knows where the conversation will lead. So I really appreciate you having me. Yeah, Carter Jensen. I've been about 5 years here at General Mills, based out of Minneapolis, where we're headquartered here. And as you mentioned, I work within our marketing organization, leading our capability innovation world, right? So, in short and plain English, that means my job is to make sure that our marketers across the globe have the best tools possible to drive their brands forward and to drive growth. And that's where I focus. So it's a ton of new technology, working on figuring out how buzzwords like AI fit within our toolbox. But then most importantly, do our brand marketers care, and do they see value in actually using these tools and growing our brands? And so that's what I focus on.
I think the seeing the value is a big part of it, because you could talk about AI until the cows come home, but if you don't actually see value, or there's no way to integrate that into what you're doing, then it's really not helpful.
Well, we could talk for 30 minutes just about that one point. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we learned early on was this idea of you can talk about it all day long. You can also run experiments as much as you would like, right? But if those aren't targeted at what our users, and when I speak about that, it's our users are the marketers who are actually going to use these tools. And we could talk about consumer use of AI as well if you wanted to. But if our marketers aren't going to use it, then there's no point in actually putting it into the world, because at the end of the day, it's not going to drive any business impact at all, right? So, yeah, it's a really contentious topic, and I know we're not the only ones fighting the fight.
I think you said something that I've thought a lot about, and I've talked a lot with about a lot with other business professionals, and it's what is your why? Like, it sounds so basic, but like, my why or your why in this instance is, how do we drive business impact? Okay, well, what is the impact that we want to have? Then start to reverse engineer and say, okay, what are some things that we can do that are newer, that creative, that can do this? But there's a goal, I think, that you have to have in mind. And when you just try to implement tech or something that feels cool and buzzworthy, it's probably not going to do a lot for you if that's all you're doing.
100%. Yeah. And we talk about too, when we look at our experimental backlog of all the things that we want to do, and whether that's things that are rooted in truth or a business problem, or whether they're one of those things that our leaders have defined as important, we always try to figure out what is the end value of it. Are we trying to save money? Are we trying to save some time? Are we trying to make more money because of the tool? And trying to put those in the category actually helps us kind of classify whether it's important or not. And I think the other thing too that we have quickly found is that often the tools that showed the most value are usually most simplistic in nature, right? And I call them gadgets or utilities. And of course, we have our larger kind of marketing transformation initiatives that are going on that are really intricate and really involved. But when you can identify a business problem, or a problem that is really holding up our marketers, or spending a ton of time, or really limiting their ability to do something, and you could fix that for them, gone are kind of you can lead with a carrot versus a stick. You don't need to worry about user adoption. You don't need to worry about, the impact, because you've identified a real problem, you found a real solution, you've deployed it appropriately. Now, all of a sudden, the rest of the world's pretty easy, because if you've done all those things correctly, your team should use it, and you should be able to start to see some value really, really quickly.
Let's take a step back and let's just talk about innovation. Like, what does that actually mean to you?
Yeah, so for me, like when I look at capabilities, and we could look at a couple of different categories of innovation. Our CEO actually many years ago used the word about this innovation key, or the innovation piano. He talked about it, which was interesting, because when you think about innovation within our world here at Mills, you have so many different things. And I think, for me, it's kind of two sides of things, right? You have capabilities innovation. We'll talk about that because that's my world, right? Of how do we give the best tools and kind of the best experiences for our brands and the marketing that kind of underpins them. We also have brand innovation of how are we creating new products, new services, new solutions for our consumers. There's kind of two sides. But for me, when I think about innovation, it kind of goes back to how are we finding new solutions to existing problems, right? That's really what we're looking at, right? And I think for me, the new solution type of thing is really exciting because in the world that we live in now, there are new possibilities each and every day. So you can pick on AI all you want, but at the end of the day, what that has underpinned is just a whole new world of new solutions, whether those are vendors or kind of core technologies that now allow us to do different things we've never been able to do before. And so when, I think anyone who's in my seat, it's like gone are the days of having a bunch of influencer agencies knocking at your door trying to be kind of the next best thing. We actually now have vendors, which of course you need to filter out a little bit, but we have teams who are constantly coming to us with solutions I never thought were possible, and solutions that we didn't know it would ever exist, and solutions to problems that were core to the business and core to our marketers. And being able to navigate that whole process is innovation for me.
I also feel like when I just personally think of innovation, I often go back to the Industrial Revolution. And I do that not because I'm a big history buff, but I just know that there was a big concern that, hey, this innovation of machines taking over human jobs. And I have a flashback to this cartoon, this Disney cartoon of John Henry that my daughter watched when she was younger. And this guy was talking about this steam engine. He's like, man, they're going to take our jobs. Like that just plays in my head.
Of course, yeah.
And it's true, but there's always a need for an elaboration or an expanding of the human mind for new jobs, new opportunities that, yes, a machine might take this specific thing, but you now have capacity to do more of the human things that you're going to do better than a machine will ever do.
100%. And if this is a topic that everyone always brings up, and especially when we get into this automation side of things, and even more particularly when you talk about creative automation, about creative jobs, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's a whole nother can of worms we can open up. But I think, when I look at it professionally and even kind of personally as well, I think, we often hear from our leaders, no one has a lack of things to do today. Right. I think we all can say, whether personally or professionally, have a list of things we would love to take more time on. Right. We would love to invest more into. We'd love to be more particular about those types of things. And when we think professionally, I would say I hear from my marketers and the marketers that we support the exact same thing of we have so many opportunities, so many ideas, so many ways that we can make our brands better serve our consumer, go after product innovation. However, we are so focused on the day-to-day tasks that we cannot focus on those things that we want to.
Yeah.
That potentially will drive more business growth. We are constantly focused on kind of the daily things. Going back to the Industrial Revolution, like you talked about, how do we take some of those daily things that are monotonous, right? How do we take some of those things that don't need so much attention and so much human investment into, and find ways to make them easier, make them more efficient, and so that we can kind of start to tick away at that more, kind of exciting and more productive to-do list that I think I'm hard pressed to find a marketer who wouldn't say they would rather do that. And I think that's what's really key.
I feel like there's fear of, could something replace you? But also, I mean, just me personally, I'm more concerned with how do I integrate this into what I'm doing and then actually make it functional, because I know it's going to take time to learn. So I have to kind of slow down a little bit to do that. So I'm sure that's a concern that you hear from people too, or at least that's maybe what comes out, whether people can voice that or not.
Yeah. And I think it actually, in a weird full circle moment, kind of goes back to this. Like, one of the big problems we have, which isn't new for anyone, is we have all these opportunities. I talked about, vendors are at our door every day.
Yeah.
But just, everyone's kind of sick of the new tool, right? Oh, we have a new login. Oh, this new thing does X, Y, and Z, but now we got to figure out how this connects to this. And I think it kind of goes back full circle to this idea of adoption of innovation doesn't need to be a whole new tool. It doesn't need to be, it could be a little utility that you pull open in your bookmark browser. And, sometimes that's the easiest way to do it. Right. So anyways, I think it is kind of this weird full circle moment.
Let's talk about, or maybe you can share with me, if you don't mind, what's some innovation that you've seen that's maybe you came up with or someone on your team came up with that's worked really well for you? And I love, by the way, the definition that innovation is just helping us to, what did you say, get a better result a different way?
Find unique solutions
Unique
to
solutions.
existing problems.
That was way better than what my
Yes,
reframing
I'm going
of
to
that.
coin that line. I think this might be new, but I'm going to use that as much as I possibly can.
I like it. Finding unique solutions to the same problems. So what's some innovation that you've seen work really well?
Right now, what we're seeing across the board is, I think one of the biggest insights we've seen is that when we think about innovation, oftentimes we look at one category of marketing, right? And usually that category, honestly, is around content. Just to be completely honest, and I'm sure you've seen some similar things within your business, Michael. Of, I was like, oh, we're always looking at how do we make carousel images better, or how do we enhance our PDP copy, or how do we make those bullets just really sing? But I think one of the interesting realities we had when we kind of started to take a step back just about a year ago is we realized that we can look at the entire marketing ecosystem in a really unique way, right? And that comes from everything from our briefing to understanding the market, to understanding what our consumers' demands are, to understanding how we're translating that into ideas and then content, and how are we measuring it, to look across the entire board, right? And I think that's what's super important. So back to your question of what have we actually seen get done, and what's some of the most important things? Some of the most important things have actually been these utility type things that everyone wants to use. So, for example, if we take a look at AI, great. The most easy example that you and I think about in terms of generative AI in commerce and marketing is PDP page enhancements. Like, we've always talked about that. We've talked about that for years, of how do we take SEO keywords and enhance them automatically with AI. What I thought was super interesting, though, is the tool we built for that actually translated into be used for a bunch of different things, not
Okay.
necessarily just, let's say, PDP page enhancements, but we started using it for interview guides. We started using it for documentation. We started using it for everything. And it goes back to this idea of we created a utility that was so valuable that we found that users thought of new solutions that they could bring to the table without us pushing it. And I think that was super important.
There's commonality across these issues or these problems that you have, and the utility that you created is helping you find solutions to that same problem, because I think a lot of problems probably come back to a couple core things.
100%. Yeah. And if you think, and we could brainstorm some core things now, I don't have those like top of mind, but like when you think about those core things, like I think you kind of go back to this idea of like, how do we save time, save money, or make money, right? Like right now,
I think those are it. I think you just got it. I think you got it.
A lot of the core things right now are saving time, right? I think that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of this, whatever a business analogy or knowing business analogy you wanted to use, right? It's a low hanging fruit. We can do things much more efficiently, right? We can make content better. We can find insights more quickly. We can uncover different things, right? When you get into save these other categories, I think that's kind of this next frontier, right? Of like, cool, how do we translate that into actual competitive advantages? Like, how do we potentially use that for savings, or for eventually make ourselves quicker so that we can actually optimize better in order to actually make more money? And I think that's the interesting turn, is how do we go from this utility to maybe connecting some of those utilities, or finding ways to actually flip it from just a nice, calculator you keep in your back pocket to actually that math tutor you might have with you, or uncovering, because of that calculator, new opportunities you didn't even know existed.
I love that. When's a time that some brand innovation just totally licked the dust? That's a new phrase I'm going to start using, but yeah.
You're going to have to help me with what you mean by lick the dust.
Just sucked. Just was not good and did not help, or maybe just flopped.
Yeah, like I won't speak to anything specific, but I think one of the kind of the holes or the traps that I've seen ourselves and other competitors fall into is going too big, too fast, and too complex, right? And so, one of the things that we talk a ton about is like, oh, well, again, we'll pick on AI for a second. Like, oh, it can write copy, it can make images, and then it can send your emails. And then, if we tie all that together, then it can be this system, and we'll put a brand on top of it, and we'll make this as, whole thing. Well, did anyone ever talk about it? Were those real problems that teams had?
Right.
What were the real problems? Like, does anyone actually want to use this? Do we put it together in a way that actually is helpful? Or is this just another tool that our teams want to use, right? And all of a sudden, what used to be a really valuable and real idea has been Frankensteined into this whole new thing that you now have to try to force user adoption into, right? Or a whole new thing that you are worried about. Hey, you're trying to coax people to log in because you spent all this money behind it. But in reality, you Frankenstein the core idea, and a really simple solution could have got you there. But 6 months later, 12 months later, you're now stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like that goes back to why. Like, why are you wanting to do something? Like, you want to build this brand on top of AI because of insert reason there. And if you don't have a reason, then maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and think about the why that's happening there. And that is, it feels like you're getting a little bit ahead of yourself before you actually think about implementation. You're not thinking through like core purpose, because I think when you have purpose, whether it's a human in life or even as a brand, you can go back to that purpose and say, am I aligned with my purpose as a human? Am I aligned with my purpose as a brand? And if you're not, then you can say, and you list out even core principles. Like, I know I have friends who they have a family mission statement. They have core values for their family.
Love that.
Yeah, it's super cool. And it feels like maybe you're overthinking it a little, but I feel like it keeps you true really to who you are and what you're about. And you can say, hey, is this thing that we're doing right now, does this actually align with my core values? And so that's what I feel like should be defined first, is like who and why, or like what are we and why do we do the things that we do? Then you can start. I think the iteration of innovation probably is much easier.
You can see crossroads in that to even like product innovation, right? Like there's some products that people love, right? Doesn't mean you're going to not innovate, not try new things. I mean, if you look at our product portfolio is full of innovation that's taken off to become the next billion-dollar brand. Like,
yeah,
of course, you'll never stop doing that. But you're not messing with what people love, right? You're not messing with, you're trying to improve upon it. You're not replacing it. And I think that's a key insight here of like, hey, if it's not broken, don't go trying to replace it. Yes, you can iterate on top of it to try to make it better, but what is that baseline and what are you trying to beat? And are you beating it with innovation, or are you simply just doing it for the sake of trying to do something new? And again, that kind of philosophy you could apply to technology, you could apply to capabilities, you could apply to product, you could apply to any type of innovation. But what is that baseline? And do we know our baseline? And are we truly trying to beat that baseline? And I think that's key.
Yeah. Where are you starting from, and where do you actually want to go? So for everyone out there that's listening, what are some practical ways that people can start to innovate? Because I think it can feel like you're going to bite off way more than you can chew, but I feel like it's probably a lot simpler than people think. It's just not going to be the behemoth right away that you're maybe hoping. Like, I'm going to instantly have generative AI watch my kid and take her to school and all this stuff. Like, okay, not quite there yet. I don't even know if I want to be, because I enjoy the car rides. But like, what are the practical ways that someone can start to implement something like this?
Yeah, we didn't even get into the innovation frameworks or any more business buzzwords. I feel like we have said enough buzzwords for the hour. But one of the things that I can't underscore enough, but B, also define too specifically, is how much kind of inspiration I've gotten from adjacent businesses. And by adjacent businesses, I mean this. It's not me researching a bunch of other CPGs and what they're doing, right? It's not me, subscribing to Grocery Dive and Food Navigator and those types of things. Yes, those are important. But what I find is that becoming smart in adjacent industries and in industries that are similar, maybe consumer facing, trying to solve consumer problems, but maybe don't have to do with food, maybe don't have to do with your sector, maybe don't have to do with like kind of even retail, to try to understand what solutions and what are they doing and how do we transpose that into things that we are doing. And you have two kind of effects here. First of all, especially for my world in CPG, like we're often not the leaders, right? So it's probably good to make sure we get that. But second of all, what you get is you get this, and this is really kind of, I think, the core definition of innovation, but you're finding, again, solutions that you never know, you didn't even ever consider, right? And kind of inspiration in places that you never would consider. And then you're able to say, well, I'm an expert in my world. I know the problems that we have. Now I'm learning more about the solutions and problems that others have and how they've been tackling it. How do you transpose the two? And so when you think about advice, like what to do, like for me, I love the startup world. Like I not because I want to, bring them in, but I think that, they're building products for consumers or building products for other businesses that we We don't have, like, I sit on product hunt every day and just start to understand what are people launching. And not to say I'm going to call them up and try to use them for General Mills business, but to say, oh, like that would be really interesting if we applied the same approach to a problem that we have here, right? Now, getting outside the tech world, I think it's also fascinating to look at, whether it's social media companies, whether it's small business, like, whatever you're looking at, how are they leading? How are they building? And what are they doing? And then how do you really make that transition? And it could be a rough transition, right? It's not going to be one for one. What I found is just immersing yourself in things that aren't right in front of you, and getting your head kind of out of the sand of your daily priorities, your email, your world, and finding a way to be curious in these other sectors has been super critical. And I would say it's the first thing you should do. And you'd be surprised how quickly you start to come up with interesting ideas, the problems that might be, again, like I said, right in front of you.
You touched on a couple of things. One is basically what you said before, is we created this utility that solved a bunch of other problems. So now I'm going to someone else who's using utility that maybe I can now use to help with my problem resolution. And again, it's a tool. You're still the one that's putting together the ideas and getting to the end result. But now you have this tool that helps aid you and helps make it a little bit easier to get there.
We can just throw out a fun example. This isn't even a real one, but it's like all of these real-time voice APIs are coming out where you can actually have these conversations with, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. And of course, none of the examples I talk about have anything to do with CPG, right? None of them have anything to do with grocery or retail or anything like that. But what you do is you start watching some of the demos, right, of how they replaced phone trees and replaced kind of, and they enhanced customer service in unique ways. Sure, I could walk up to our customer service department and say, hey, we should do this.
Sure.
But what would also be interesting is, like, what would that look like in our marketing department? Like, who would we have on the other line? Who would be your phone a friend if you got in trouble or wanted to know what's next for your brand? Like, what would that look like? That's not a good idea at its core, but you can start to see how we're taking technology that was ultimately built, and the core, low-hanging fruit aspect of it was something that is completely unrelated to your job. And how do you change it? What you'll find is that, and in my experience, you'll find is, of course, out of the box, it's not going to be great. No one's going to really like it, but getting that in front of others and testing it and pressure testing with different opportunities, you're going to see refinement of it in a way that's really interesting. And of course, a lot of it's going to die. But what you saw there in my kind of diatribe I just went on is finding new solutions to existing problems in a way that you can really build an interesting backlog of ideas.
I think you have to be willing to experiment too. Like if you're expecting something to, and tamper expectations, if you tamp them down, I should say, if you are expecting that you're going to have this great solution, it's just automatically going to work and it's be incredible. Like you've clearly never invented or tested or experimented with anything. Like it might take time to get there, but you have to start somewhere and start to see where it doesn't work and where it does work, and then start to make refinements based on that.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of it's going to fail, right? The refinements might not work. It's going to become too complicated. But again, back to a point I made 10 minutes ago of like, don't Frankenstein the thing till it works. Like there are certain things where it does not pass the baseline. It doesn't make anyone's life better. It doesn't make anyone's life easier. Yes, they can align to the promise, but in reality, it's never there. Like that's the baseline you have to constantly think about. And you can constantly say to your experiments or your backlog or your ideas, like, hey, does it beat the current solution? Does it add enough value to the business in a way that really betters our marketers or betters the service to our consumers, and never kind of lose track of what that baseline is?
Well, I think you have to have a culture in your company or in your group, or even just personally, a personal culture of, I'm okay that this investment in time may not result in the best solution right now, or it might take additional time to get there, but that's okay. And that's part of what innovating is
100%.
Being willing to fail a bunch of times before you ever get where you want to go.
100%.
I have a question that I think is an interesting way to cap this off. And maybe you have a good story, but what's one of the wildest things that's ever happened to you in your CPG career?
Wildest things in my CPG career.
I did not prepare you for this question, so I totally.
I like it a lot better than like your favorite book you read or favorite movie. This is good.
No one's reading a book. AI is going to read it to you.
Stories from the trenches is what you could call this, Michael.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
One of the coolest things. So like one of the reasons I love working at a CPG, I come from agency and consulting background, but like someone always said, it's always great to be closest to the basket or closest to the consumer. And I love to see, and it helps when you're working with brands like as big as the brands I'm lucky enough to work with every day. But I used to be in charge of our D2C work and stood up our D2C kind of world. And we deployed Shopify. It's a whole other podcast, right? But what I absolutely loved, and the craziest things, is that if you remember, some of our brands like Reese's Puffs and some of our other brands like used to drop and continue to drop like very sought after collector items, right? And so this is like collaborations with Cause or with Travis Scott or whatever it might be. And our D2C systems inherently were the ones that would facilitate these drops, right? And so without ever really understanding the size of any of this, what I quickly found out, and I won't name any numbers or what it exactly was, but it was a Friday morning, 8 a.m. It was COVID, so we were working from home, and we were just kind of getting going for the day. And I got a text from one of my devs, and he's like, "Open the dashboard," and it was 7:59 or whatever it was. And so I just had my iPad, I clicked the Shopify app live, and it clicked 8. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" All of a sudden, the thing basically explodes. Like the numbers just just climbing away. The globe, if anyone's used Shopify, the globe lights up, and basically it was a drop. And I had never experienced a volume, and yes, it is a massive company that I'm a small piece of, but for founders out there, for any of your clients or partners who own a store and have really investment into each one of those sales, to see it go from 0 to that number so quickly and so sporadically and just spike in this interesting way, was just absolutely wild. And just to sit there and watch all over the world the people who were buying it and understand really kind of how big of a deal this was, it was just so tangible that I would say that was like one of the craziest moments of my job, is actually see this dashboard light up in a way that I've never actually seen in real time before. And I think it was fascinating. So there's a quick story for you that I hope sets the bar high for your next guest.
Stories in the trenches. I like it. Well, I think it's exciting and rewarding just to see time and effort of a team that has invested in something, to see it come to fruition when maybe not everything's going to be a success, but when you do see something be a success, it's very rewarding. And I think if anything, it plants a little bit of a bug in you that's like, hey, try this again, do this again, see if you can get this again. Like
100%.
You want to keep going. So I think that's good encouragement for brands out there.
Yeah. And of course, everyone wants to emulate that day, and it's hard to emulate.
Right. Yeah. You can't have that day every single day.
Correct. But and that's what makes it awesome.
Right. Exactly. That it wouldn't, if it weren't unique like that, then and every day we're like that, then your next great big thing would have to be way bigger. And that's just a totally other conversation. But thanks for coming on, man, and chatting about brand innovation. And hope to see you around the ether.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, man.